Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for Out on Film's opening night and this evening's screening of Surviving the Silence and our live streaming Q&A with the director and the cast of Surviving the Silence. And so I want to introduce director Cindy Abel. If you will wave to everybody. And we have the subjects of our film, Colonel Pat Thompson and Barbara Brass, joining us from California. We have Colonel Greta Kammermeyer, who is joining us. And Greta, I'm not sure where you're joining us from.
Seattle.
Seattle. And we have Mary Newcomb, who is the lawyer that you saw in the film, joining us also from California. So Mary, welcome. So I am looking at the chat as people are kind of coming in and reacting to the movie, and everybody's extremely moved by it and extremely moved by the story. And Cindy, I want to go ahead and start with you and just say congratulations, and really to all of you, congratulations on bringing this story to the screen in a very important way. And Cindy, why don't we start with you and just tell us a little bit about how this story came to you, because it wasn't exactly the story you started to tell.
Well, the story in the beginning, its origin story, is that I happened to be at Sierra College where I was screening my first film, Breaking Through, about openly LGBT elected officials. And afterwards, these two nice women came up to me and told me how much they'd enjoyed it and said, "Oh, we're going to be doing our talk the next night." And they started telling me a little bit about it, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I had a ton of questions, of course, because I'm, infinitely curious. And so I showed up to Sierra College to their talk with the camera and tripod in hand, and I started recording. And about halfway through, I thought, wow, we're onto something here. The love story with the unknown history wrapped into it. I just thought, I can't miss this opportunity. So I literally crashed the stage and, waded through all these people who were trying to say hello and get selfies and et cetera with Barb and with Pat. And I said, I want to tell your story. And Barb said, oh, okay. And I said, no, you don't understand. And of course, at the time, I didn't know it would turn into a 6-year journey. But it's one of those happy surprises that because it took a bit longer than we had originally planned and hoped for, we had a whole new ending. Otherwise, it was going to be this nice, ending of two women in love walking off into the sunset and getting to enjoy all the civil rights that LGBTQ folks were finally getting. And then came the 2016 elections and everything changed. And they went from being activists and being out to being on the front lines and starting their own resistance group, which gave us the end of the film.
Excellent. So for Pat and Greta, what is it like for both of you to be able to tell your story? The irony of silence is not lost on any of us. What is it like to be able to tell your story now and in this kind of forum? And Pat, I'll start with you.
It's really relieving, after a long military career and not being able to be out. And so it's the freedom that I'm enjoying so much. I love being out and proud.
Excellent. And Greta, how is it for you being able to tell your story and have it screen like this?
Again.
Yeah.
I've been through this before. Bernie was sitting there to our right, told me when we were first sort of invited by Barbara Streisand to do a film, she said, "Are you ready for this? You have no idea what's coming." And I thought, no big deal. Well, it turned out to be a big deal, and it lasted a long, long time. And thousands of people have been this journey, but only Pat and I really got the notoriety on behalf of all of those others who had served.
Mm-hmm.
And Barb, what's it like for you? And talk a second to other military spouses. You went through this journey too. So what is it like for you to be also telling your part of this story?
Well, my thought when we were asked to speak at Sierra College was that people need to know the point of view of a military spouse of an LGBT service member, because that is another aspect of hiding. So I was absolutely wrapped up in telling that story from the very beginning. And hopefully it came through clearly at the very beginning, and you could see scenes of us at our very first speech that Cindy was able to capture. That was important to be able to share that as a spouse, and others who are, there are many, many out there, probably so many still closeted, and so many are starting to pull that closet door closed again right now because of what's going on. So yes, I feel good that my part of the story was part of this film.
And Mary, as a lawyer in one of these cases, what is it like for you to get a case like this?
Well, there were many factors going into the struggle to repeal the policy. And we'd been working with other plaintiffs for quite a while. And, you know, each person kind of chipped away at it. Greta gave us an opportunity that I don't think anyone anticipated, because she had such a high rank, because the facts involving why she was being targeted were so remarkable. So I think for us, it was really highlighting a lot of the frailties of the regulation and how we could mobilize people around that, as well as give us something to really litigate.
So one of the things that really struck me, Pat, is how do you navigate telling a general no or stonewalling a general as you're walking this line? And I think it's a really moving moment in the film when you're talking about, all of you, about doing your duty but also doing what's right. How in the moment, what is that like for you, kind of putting off a general?
Well, thank you. I knew that I had the right to make the decisions, and he may not have known that, but I did. And so I knew that I didn't have to do what he said or when he wanted it done, that it could be done when I allowed it to be done.
What is that first moment like when you're told that you have to do this? For Pat?
Well, when I found out that it was Colonel Kamelmeyer, I just said, oh no, I can't do that to her. I did not want to do that to her, because she and I were so much alike, both nurses, both colonels, you know, and we knew each other, and on some level. And so it was hard. It's really hard.
And Greta, you and Pat have that really, really beautiful moment when you're talking, and you say that when you're saying that you felt bad for her and what this put her through. Talk to us a little bit about what that means to you as a service member to another service member when you're going through proceedings like this. I mean, for the rest of us who are not in the service, what does that really mean as you're going, you know, with each other through something like this?
I had a great deal of respect for Colonel Thompson. We had worked together on a number of military projects, and so you know, there was this belief in her fairness, and also my ignorance made it so that I had no idea that she was in the same situation that I was in as a lesbian serving in the military. And I'm really glad for that, because I think I would never have wanted to put her in that awkward situation. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that she was a lesbian. And yet you know that she is bound by laws and regulations, and yet, I always felt that there would be an exception because I was this wonderful nurse and had the delusion of grandeur that with my attorney we would change the policy. And of course, that was pretty naive at the time, and so was I. But it was, certainly traumatic, the whole thing. And I can't help but think that as an attorney, Mary sort of knew the outcome, but also that it was only the beginning of the fight. And for me, losing my career, it was sort of a slam in the face.
And Mary, having you kind of know, I mean, as everybody said, you knew going into this you were going to lose. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion. What was it like for you, though, as you're trying this, and Pat is conducting the proceeding in the way that she did? I mean, because you had no idea that this was all going to happen, right?
No, I had no idea that Pat was a lesbian, no. But what was clear right away, and I just want to make a point, the litigation is only part of the story. I mean, so much of what changed was public attitudes. And every time we pick a case, every time we're pushing a case, we try to remember to tell the story and help people understand what's involved. And that, I think, is one of the things Greta gave us in volumes. It was just really a special story. And in the litigation, we knew we would lose at this particular level, but we didn't think it was at all sure that we would lose as we went up the ladder. And actually, we didn't.
And Cindy, as these stories are unfolding in front of you, as a documentary filmmaker, you don't really know how this is unfolding. Kind of, what is this process like for you as all of this starts to unfold, as you're making this movie and you're trying to tell this story? How do you as a filmmaker react as these things are going on, as you're finding more and more out?
Mm-hmm. It's really a matter of being able to pivot in the moment. And so because I'm a director and I can't help myself, I'm going to let Barb and Pat know that they're welcome to go sit on the other side of the table. So Barb doesn't have to hold the flag up behind Pat's head. So just know it's okay to do that. It's really, truly, it is a matter of being able to pivot and to adapt. And that's also a nod to the strength of my team, particularly Michael Bruno, who is our director of photography, and Jesse Freeman, who was a co-writer and was also a camera person on a couple of our shoots. And he actually did the entire shoot with Mary Newcomb. And they have taught me a lot about being flexible. It's about seeing the moment that's happening and being able to respond to it very quickly. And they know my sensibilities, and so they were able to respond very quickly in a way that would meet what they very well figured I would want. It was also allowing Greta and Barb and Pat and Eric Fanning to tell their story in their own words and letting them talk, because they're all such masterful storytellers. To be able to break down the legalese in the way that Mary Newcomb did is just unbelievable. And she just put it all out there exactly like, those of us who aren't lawyers need it to be. So a lot of it, I knew some of the story. I didn't know all the layers under the story. And those are those incredible surprises where you kind of lean in and know, okay, there's something happening here. I'm not quite sure what or how it's going to affect the overall through line. But I really need to pay attention and dig a little bit deeper, even if it means there's some questions on my endless notepad that don't get answered today or don't get asked, let alone answered. So that's a big part of it, is being able to see what is being offered up in the moment and being flexible enough to receive it, and then come back later and try to put all these puzzle pieces together and being willing to break it down and put it together from another perspective, and then, show it to a few friends who love me enough to tell me the truth and have them break it apart and say what's not working. And, you know, so it's a constant refinement. And I don't remember who said it, but a film is much like a poem. It's never finished. It's only abandoned. And because there's a point at which you go, okay, that's it. That's enough. It's time to get this baby out into the world.
You have people like us saying, finish. I am curious for Pat and Greta, you know, the serving in silence and going through don't ask, don't tell, and where we are currently for people in the service in a very tenuous or seemingly tenuous position that a lot of people are in. What would you say to young service people who are struggling as well with that same sense of duty that you had to country and to the service, but also how you navigate that in your own lives and duty to yourselves and duty to country? What would you say to young service people or people who want to go into the service and feel that maybe it's still not for LGBTQ people? Pat, I'll start with you.
Well, I think that I would tell them that the military would be a good thing to try. And right now, I'm not sure about our transgender friends because of this administration, but before they've been able to serve and it's been wonderful, and they've made, you know, they're just doing a great job for our country. And I think anybody that wants to serve our country should be able to do it.
And Greta, what would you say to them?
I think you have to have a passion for wanting to serve this country, and you have every right to do that. And that said, there are also people who really still resent us and our existence. And so to use judgment in the sort of the coming out story. And so that's a conflict for me, because I keep on saying to people that they ought to live their truth, and to be denied that by the military because of an administration that you currently have that sort of does everything that you can to undermine decency and integrity. Pardon my political stance.
We're all friends here.
You know, so I think it is a tenuous time, but I mean, for me, I loved my 30 years in the military, and the fact that I had a good attorney to get me back in, and to give me that opportunity to serve in a different way was also very significant. But you really are allowed to be all that you can be there.
And Barb, what would you say to young couples, military spouses, partners, maybe who aren't married? You know, what is your advice to them, or what would you say to them about being partnered or married to someone of the same sex in the service, and what that means for them as the partner?
Well, we know one couple who are in that situation, and they were, I think they were in Hawaii for 3 years. They may be back by now. Both partners, spouses, wives went together, and they seem to do quite well. Now, I don't really know how it works for people who have a commander who might still want to give them a bad time. You know, there are other people still, it doesn't even matter what the law is. People do what they do, whether they're willing to take the consequences or not. And sometimes the consequences of harming an LGBT service member can be pretty detrimental to that harmer, but they are passionate about their hate. So, you know, we still have to deal with that. And I am not one to want to give advice, but my advice would be to think about how you're going to comport yourself during the time that you're in a situation that could be volatile. Today, always look behind you, look around you, because it's not as good as it might have been a couple of 3 or 4 years ago, but it hopefully is still safe and still viable for people to go in as spouses of military people.
And Mary, I'm curious. These, like you said, this is a process, and the struggle takes a long time. I mean, everything we've gotten as LGBTQ people has taken a long time. What do you say to people who don't know whether to be the one, to be the Pat, to be the Greta? This turned out well. I mean, it was a struggle. There was a lot going on from start to finish. But what do you say to the next Pat and Greta who's out there who may not know if they want to be the one?
Well, I think that's the job of at least the lawyer and friends and other people to explain what's actually involved. Because I don't think Greta, as Greta said, she didn't really anticipate the kind of exposure she got. I remember talking to Greta and I said, are you prepared for the fact that everybody's going to know that you're a lesbian? And she kind of looked like a deer in the headlights. And I said, do your children know? And she said, no. Well, they suspect, but they don't know. And I said, well, you have to make that decision. And then the next day I got a phone call from Greta saying, yes, my children know and they're fine. So, for everybody, it's a different cost. One of the very sad things is when people don't find, litigation can be brutal and miserable. And so someone really has to have a lot of support and also has to be cognizant of the demands that will be made on them. And by and large, the people that I worked with when I was at Lambda were fabulous and really stepped up to a very hard task. I think that I practiced this kind of law when social media just wasn't so profound. And I think the hate that is steered towards people in the news is really terrible and something that, I don't know how you help people through that, but that's, you have to understand that you're going to be a target.
Greta, how do you make that decision? Going to know that your life is going to suddenly become very, very public. How do you struggle making that decision?
I got a bunch of dogs helping out right now. I think you look for meaning, out of something that is so uncomfortable certainly as it was in the 90s, letting anybody know that you were gay or a lesbian. That was a very awkward time, and you didn't know what the ramifications were. And as I just said, I thought that I would be blazing a trail and the policy would be overturned, and decided that I needed to do that because I had been thrown out because the first time, because I had been married and was pregnant with my first child, and you couldn't have kids. And so somebody took a stand, and the policy ended up changing. So I thought that
I remember.
Taking that stand would make it so that they would change the policy. It took 17 years of lobbying. But
They did.
We are a patient people, sort of. I do have a question from our audience, and for Pat. If you could address Congress right now, what would you say?
Oh,
it's probably not for airing.
I've heard me too many times screaming at the television for 4 years almost. How would you address Congress?
well, I have a lot of faith in Pelosi's Congress. And I have hope that things will get better, and they are fighting. I do know that they are fighting for us every day. And the Senate is just another story, you know. So we have to really fight to try to take that Senate back. And a lot, of course, has happened that we can't take back. You know, there are people in jobs for life and that we would not like to have there, but things that we have to deal with.
And Mary, we have a question for you. Was there a personal and professional cost to you in this process?
No. No, I was doing a job that was very public at the time within a very small niche of society. And it was not a problem for me. I had been out for several years and practicing in this area. What was hard was to watch the impact on Greta, because at times it was so hard. When she lost, it was in the board hearing, it was very painful. And when she was actually discharged, and they had that final ceremony where her troops were so clearly loving her, that was devastating. But I feel lucky to have been able to be part of that and to have seen it. And I'm happy it turned out better.
And Cindy, as this movie has, it's out, you're screening places, we're here, we've got a lot of people online watching. As the filmmaker and as the caretaker of all of these stories that you've showcased here, what is the one thing that you want people to walk away with after seeing this?
In the words of John Lewis, it's that we need to try to make a way where there is no way. And when I look at Pat and I look at Greta, that's exactly what they did. And that's what inspires me right now when I feel down about all the losses, you know, losing Justice Ginsburg and what hasn't been served in terms of justice around Breonna Taylor and all the folks, you know, Black Lives Matter and all the folks who aren't getting justice and have never or have so often not received justice in our country. And it's overwhelming. You know, some days I just honestly don't want to get out of bed. I feel it so deeply. And then I remember how in times that were even worse in our country than they are now, that people stood up, women stood up. And whether it's in the foreground, like Greta, or in the background, like Pat, they still did the best possible thing that could be done at great cost to themselves and at risk to themselves. And that to me is so inspirational. And it shows that, you know, I mean, come on, they're retired, right? They could just sit back and say, you know, we've told our story. We don't need to keep telling it. We don't need to be on the front lines anymore. But no, they're still active and they're still taking responsibility for what's happening in the world today and for looking at what is their part to play. And that is so inspiring to me. And that's what I hope audiences can come away with, is the hope that they bring, that love can last 30 plus years, even though sometimes you have to, Barb and Pat had to pretend that they weren't a couple. How does that happen? I mean, you know, to stay together that long in the best of times. Or, you know, that with fierce love and with commitment to integrity and determining to be resilient, we can create the change that we need to see in America, and we can get closer to fulfilling the promise of America. That these two women, even though their country didn't want to know who they really were, they were still willing to give their lives, literally and figuratively, for this country that was denying them part of their rights. And if they can do that, that inspires me to at least try to find a way. And I hope audiences will try to find a way to live their lives in that same manner.
And Pat and Barb, having seen your story told here. It's a beautiful love story. We all love you. I mean, from the time that you were here in Atlanta. And so, what do you want people to take away from your having done this?
Well, the importance of being persistent, even though, you are told that, that you shouldn't do whatever it is you thought was right, but to just persist and carry on and do the job because you know that it's the right thing to do.
And I do believe that having our story out there can only make a positive impact on anybody who sees it, especially people who don't understand, don't know what the history has been and what the future can hold. It's such a critical time. It's so important right now. It couldn't even be more important, in my estimation, under the circumstances that we're all living under today. And as a personal note, our 36th anniversary is next week, and this is a wonderful gift to us.
Yay!
Hey.
Whatever it is,
37.
it's 40, it's 100, it's a lot of years. And it does get better. It does get better. Yeah, so I want people to know that commitment to relationship, your goals, your passion, your whatever it is that you feel strongly about, is just do it and pursue it, and hopefully it will not end in any kind of a tragedy. It will end in, or it won't end. It'll be a continuation. It is, to me, a continuation. This film will go on and on after we're all dead and gone, and hopefully the generations to come will see it and say, wow, that happened. Now we're living in paradise. I don't know why they had to go through that.
And I think that's a beautiful note to bring us to a close. And on behalf of everybody who has watched the film tonight and who has kind of put comments in our chat, there is an overwhelming for Greta and Pat to thank you for your service and for being heroes to the movement. And I want to thank each of you for telling this story, for the fight that you did to bring us to this point. And Cindy, thank you for bringing this to all of us. As Barb just said, it's a history for us, that we all need to know, and that how many of us play a part in our own history. So I want to thank all of you for joining us and participating in Out on Film's opening night. This is a beautiful way to start and kick off our festival, and I can't thank you all enough. And for everybody who joined us tonight, I want to thank you. This is the first time that we're all trying to go virtual, and I know we had a few little glitches tonight, and I really thank you all for your patience as we kind of work through it. And hopefully everything gets better, as Barb just said. And I hope that you will join us for the entire 11 days that we are running. We have a lot of beautiful stories that we're going to tell. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you all. Well done and congratulations, and have the happiest of anniversaries. And hopefully we'll all get together in Atlanta sometime soon. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Hmm.